Chapter 6 Sunken Abominations.
Have you ever stopped at any point along this journey to ask yourself, did that creature actually need to die? Couldn't we have found a way to just leave it be while still going about our business? Imagine for a moment an armored alien spaceman suddenly arrives on Earth and starts indiscriminately gunning down anything in its path, including humans, never once stopping to consider whether those foreign creatures possess any sentience comparable to its own. That's what's going on. Would you even be capable of such callous destruction if you were dropped in the Amazon jungle, for example, armed with a handgun? Could you emotionally justify gunning down jaguars, camions, or anacondas? Well, what about creatures that pose no threat to you, like macaws, sloths, or toucans? This real dangerous place you know isn't only home to hostile creatures, it's also the home of an entire ecosystem. What damage are we causing to Zebes simply by shooting the harmless small fry in our way? Will this sudden loss of life cause a butterfly effect that eventually eradicates the entire ecosystem? Even if we distance ourselves from the morality of recklessly destroying xenoecology, which may or may not possess higher intelligence of its own, we have absolutely no comprehension of the long-term effects of our carnage. After all, the entire Space Pirate Manifesto is established on protecting yourself and eliminating outside threats at any cost. Are we truly in the right as far as these innocent creatures are concerned? Have we already become what we've set out to destroy? As our morality sinks, so does our underwater elevator, docking us deep in a sandy subterranean ocean cave system. Cavities are bored sporadically in the distance, giving this channel the look of a sunken termite mound. The music in Meridia is uncomfortable. Every time a rhythm begins, some other instrument or a new series of sounds seems to interject and throw off your expectations. These changes in rhythm take just long enough for you to get comfortable with the unnerving sounds of this place before the tempo and disjointed variety completely shift it all once again. This ambiance wouldn't sound out of place in a horror movie. Let's not stick around any longer than we have to. Landing on the seaweed below, we dodge a couple rippers and drop way down a long shaft with even more rippers patrolling the narrow opening. We land on a small vegetated platform amidst even more rippers with a red door to our right. Shooting our way inside, we discover the first save station of Meridia. It's good to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that we can now explore this uncharted terrain with this safety net locked in right at the beginning. Back in the past room, we drop further down still and reach the bottom with a blue door on our left, as well as a new enemy crawling around the sediment below. This spiky-shelled mollusk is called a... brace yourself, an ouch. Yep, these names just keep getting better. The internal name for the ouch is a toge, meaning thorn in Japanese. So yes, this glorified Spiny from Super Mario Bros. Is actually named after the onomatopoeia for the pain received by touching it. The ouch burrows away from us if we get too close anyway, so let's just have a mutual understanding and stay out of each other's business. Though I'd love to stay and imagine the story behind how this shelled sea slug got its name, we have a lot of ground to cover. The next room over is a long corridor inhabited with scattered choots and puyos. There is a visible water line below, meaning that we are actually in an air pocket in the cave system. Some of the platforms are made entirely with seaweed, while others are mounds of overgrown sand. In the center of the room, we can see huge brown bramble stalks woven like wicker in the background. If we've learned anything so far from the context clues in Meridia, it's that this place is far larger than we can even perceive from our limited perspective. The next room over, we are dropped in a small enclosure with a submerged sand pit. Inside lurks a yapping maw lurching outward to pull us under. However, there is also a colony of a new zeb-like species rising and charging us from the sand. These purple crustaceans are called zoas. Mechanically, they are just slightly more robust than zebs and zebos, but aesthetically, zoas are entirely different. These large-clawed, green-eyed shrimp will actually swim backwards to ram Samus as opposed to nipping at her with their claws. An interesting observation in how these creatures protect their habitats, as well as symbiotically coexist obsessed with yapping maws. Everything seems to get along with yapping maws but us, I swear. Now, for the sake of science, let's ignore the blue door across from us and let this yapping maw nab us and jerk us into the quicksand. We sink below the screen and through a dark, muddy tunnel while being bombarded with bulls until we are spat out into another small room where many Zoa slowly emerge from the bottom of what I can only dub a sandfall. Meridia is going to be doing this trick a lot, so for the sake of avoiding confusion and assuring we stay on track, I'll be guiding us along as much of a straightforward path through Meridia as possible. Just know that even with our map, it is very easy to get very lost in here, and these quicksand traps are partially to blame, as our map neglects to illustrate how and where these one-way connections happen. Luckily for us, this particular one was placed here as a fair warning of what's to come, considering the left blue door and the one that's above the sand trap both led to the same large room we will explore in just a moment. But before we go, remember that there is also a sealed door to our right. With no other choice, we head left and work our way through a large tunneling underwater cave system filled with ouches, sculpteras, and chutes. Seaweed is far more scarce in these muddy channels, and the layers of sediment in the background imply millennia of exposed erosion. Climbing up and to the right will lead to a singular floating platform at water level with roots dangling into the sea waters below. On one side of it stands a high cliff face, and on the other is the same blue door we didn't open from earlier. The ceiling is very high here, so instead we climb up the left side of the submerged caves and leap from one tiny outcropping to the next to reach a new corridor on our left with a green door on the floor. Passing it for now, we can keep jumping high up in the room, reaching the mass of thick viney roots stretching down from the ceiling. This new opening leads down and around to a cupped cavity in the ground. Standing in it reveals that there is another door below us, however it's locked as well. Though it's possible to wall kick here early, doing so is pointless due to the lock. This one won't be opening anytime soon, so let's head back to the super missile door and drop inside. Suddenly we are zooming down quickly through a vertical pipe system, passing multiple biomes we haven't yet discovered, but in the blink of an eye you might have noticed something familiar. Was that a Metroid? We fall into a forest green crusty room with icicles dripping from the pink metallic structures, and are given the chance to re-enter the elevator tube above us for another look. Looking closely during our ascent, we can definitely spy what appears to be a living Metroid in one of those rooms we passed. That was no ancient power generator. That was an actual living Metroid, right? We were definitely meant to see that. And if that tiny glimpse of horror didn't at the very least surprise you, the idea that we might very well be encountering real Metroids soon should at least put you on edge. Those monsters are supposed to be extinct. It was just for a moment. Are you sure that's what you really saw? As we second guess our own perceptions, we drop down the mechanical platforms and bomb our way through the pipework, landing in a chilly crossroad with a blue door on either side of us. To save some time and potential frustration, let's go left, remembering this unopened door for later. Inside we glimpse a new enemy sinking behind a sandfall and submerging itself into the quicksand below, firing globby projectiles at us. This plated, large-eyed crustacean is called an Evir. The Evir can be frozen with the ice beam, but if left alone will burrow in the sand and relentlessly pelt us with attacks until we leave the room, which is also made more challenging by the realization that the sandfalls impede our movements even with the gravity suit. The endless stream of sediment is weighing down our jumps, making traversing this corridor especially tricky. It also doesn't help that the metal blocks we have as platforms are scattered and tiny, making the Evir's attacks more about trapping us in the sand and less about scaring us away. If we manage to get to the far left of the room but fell in the sand, we don't need to mash jump and fight the sinking sand to escape. By entering Morph Ball and rolling left, we can pass through a secret hidden tunnel. Shooting up from here, we can destroy a block above, allowing us easier space to reach the door without having to deal with the nearby sandfall. The next room over is a small tunnel patrolled by a quick red scissor. The room is now coated in a gross fungal algae, tree, and the plant life appears to resemble serrated blue stalks with white cupped flowers. The next room over is what used to be another small tunnel through a glass tube, but this one is completely shattered. The similarity of this wreckage absolutely brings to mind the previous glass tube we traversed through our way to Kraid's lair, which, if you recall, was destructible by power bomb. The layout and visual clues of this room assure the player that these glass tubes can indeed be destroyed. Dealing with the red scissors and exiting the left of the rubble, we can fight our way left only to discover a dead end behind a green blockade. Do not forget where we saw this and what side it faces. These blockades will drop once we leave the room, so we don't want to accidentally trap ourselves later on. In the previous room, we got a pretty strong cue to follow the scissors emerging from a hidden path in the ground underneath some blocks. Rolling through, we drop into a pink metal room with a blue door on the left and a red door to the right. Taking the red door, we shoot our way in and discover the long-awaited Meridian map station. Taking a look, we discover that we haven't even come close to seeing even half of Meridia. It's also interesting to point out the vertical elevator drop shows that we were technically inside 2 rooms during the ride. Those indeed were real rooms we saw and not some scripted event, meaning that whatever that Metroid-like creature was, it wasn't some illusion. And now we know exactly where it is. Heading to the opposite blue door, we work our way through a long tunnel with tall mounds of lush terrain between single tile holes, each one seemingly hiding either Boyons or Zebos. As we make our way through, we hear that the music has actually changed from the Meridian theme to the lower Brinstar theme. Odd. To our left, we reach another green blockade, but this one is operable from our side, so we shoot it open and poke our nose forward past some more pits with Boyons and Zebos. One of these pits seems to dip down all the way off screen. Considering that this is otherwise a dead end, we jump inside to investigate and find ourselves falling through a hidden passageway, landing in another tunnel below. Recognizing where we are, the elevator to Norfair is just to our right, and the old glass tunnel that got us there is to our left. This is the moment where the players who didn't investigate powerbombing the glass tunnel will eagerly give it a shot, as we were just shown that similar destroyed tunnel a few rooms back. If we didn't realize this entire run through Meridia was just a flyby tutorial of the underwater labyrinth, we might be frustrated thinking we just accidentally lost our progress in the area. To tell you the truth, there was no reason to even enter Meridia from the wrecked ship at all. Not a single item was acquired during this excursion anyway, as the real entrance to Meridia is right here. Outside of the glass tube we can destroy ourselves. This entire trip through Meridia thus far was meant to scare us, bewilder us, taunt us with the prospect of encountering Metroids, and teach us how to uncover the real entrance. With this knowledge in advance, we could have instead spent this journey to the glass tube through Brinstar in Crateria, looting any pickups we might have missed along the way. But now we know that for next time. Before moving on, we can take advantage of the save station below to lock in our progress. With that taken care of, it's time we scale the floating mossy platforms and enter Meridia proper through the door on the ceiling. The music has changed into a melancholy, slow series of flutes and chimes. Still uncomfortable, but not nearly as unnerving as before. Inside this large, mossy area, we defeat some scissors and Skullteras while taking in the beautifully bizarre floating geometrical monuments in the black void beyond. These structures, resembling dual-sided obelisks of various length and width, are all vertically arranged in seemingly random positions. No doubt this is the work of intelligent life, but who or what created them? What purpose do they serve? Is it possible a species we've been indiscriminately killing this whole time was actually a highly intelligent, advanced life form constructing something that only makes sense to its own like-minded species? If it wasn't built by scissors or something else we've encountered so far, then why haven't we seen any evidence of this race yet? Was the entirety of Meridia flooded in some sort of chaotic event that happened long after these structures were constructed? We haven't seen Chozo build anything even remotely like these mystical polyhedrons, so this mystery will have to hang in our thoughts as we explore. Climbing high up the oceanic abyss, we spy a missile expansion lodged deep in the mossy rock. The X-ray scope clues us into a devilishly difficult result. The blocks beneath the expansion are only destructible by speed booster, meaning that we will somehow have to shine spark up this whole room, dodging each of the scattered platforms along the way, and hit this one particular spot. Since we have to launch from the ground, let's carefully jump down directly below the expansion so we can get a visual on where to leap. All the way down, past several narrow gaps, we hit bottom and land right next to a slightly bigger, slightly brighter seaweed plant than the rest. Using this as our marker, we try to build up speed booster, only to realize the room is much too narrow. There was a short hallway just above us to the right leading to a blue door, but it's not long enough. And the room past it drops us down into a pit, so running through it won't work either. Instead, we drop down to the bottom again and open the red door to our right. This leads us to the other side of that green blockade wall we spied earlier in the long hallway infested with scissors. Shooting it open and defeating the enemies, we will actually have enough space to pull this off, but it'll be tricky. And every time we screw this up, we will have to pay another super missile to reopen the lock and try again. Once the room is clear, we run full speed, shooting as we go, ensuring the door will open once we reach it. Crouching to build up the charge right before or after the door to avoid slipping below, we find our seaweed marker and rocket straight up, narrowly avoiding the platforms and smashing through the blocks to grab the missile expansion. This just might be the hardest one in the game to grab, so don't feel bad if it takes you a while to nab this goodie. For the sake of time, we're going to put off investigating the other blue door we investigated earlier, and instead continue climbing straight up. Just above, we reach a ledge which allows us to spy another hidden goodie. This time a super missile expansion is perched inside a small pocket in the rock. Problem is, it's completely surrounded by impenetrable green stone. But carefully watching the scissor inside clues us into a hidden tunnel to the right of the expansion. This little guy is actually scripted to repeatedly use this tunnel over and over to ensure we noticed this. We can bomb all we like all over this room, but we won't be able to get in there without discovering where that tunnel lets out. Giving up for now, we continue climbing up the snaking channels until we reach a new blue door. This one opens out into more open floating polyhedron ruins, but now with metallic construction supports and a grapple block hanging from the ceiling. Not giving up on that super missile expansion, let's ignore the grapples for now and drop down the cliff face. Landing on a large triangular platform, we can use our X-ray scope to investigate this left wall adjacent to our goal in the other room. Even without the X-ray scope, we can spy scissors entering and exiting a hidden tunnel sneakily hidden halfway up the wall. Jumping and entering Morph Ball, we can slide through the tiny passageway and roll through to the other room, past another scissor and the first hidden tunnel, dropping us right in front of the upgrade. Admittedly, this upgrade perplexed me more than any other in the game, considering we were teased with it in a completely different room from where we'd actually need to begin to access it. But get used to it. That's just how Meridia is. The puzzle design in this place is all about testing our tenacity. Dropping back out of the hidden tunnel, we land on a blue door on the floor. This just lets out to that same large room we spied below, we're saving for later. So jumping back to the grapple block, we swing ahead to find a whole row of upcoming grapple blocks with many brittle crumbling ones scattered within and no platforms below. Delicately swinging onward, we can land on a couple precious blocks floating below a blue door on the ceiling. Checking it out, we emerge in an enclosed space with a peculiar orange Skullterra. No other Skullterra in the game looks anything other than gray. Stranger still, the artwork for Meridia, seen in the German Super Metroid official game guide, depicts Samus underwater next to this particular one-of-a-kind orange Skullterra. So why is this one different? I don't know. It's just weird, man. I don't have all the answers. Moving upwards, we reach what looks like a dead end, but the X-ray scope once again reveals a hidden passageway on the left side. Bombing and rolling through, we slide through a tunnel and drop in front of a Zebo nest. Just past them, we cross a blue door and experience an environmental shift. The Lower Brinstar theme once again is playing, and we are in front of a green blockade door. Checking it out carefully, we can see that this path actually points us to the elevator leading back to Criteria. A helpful shortcut for later, but we don't want to accidentally lock ourselves out of Meridia, so let's backtrack to the grapple room. Now this next part is going to get tough, but don't stress over it too much. I promise I'll give you an easy alternative after we do this the intended way. Our next grapple block is nearby, so we latch on and swing forward, but following it, we can only see another single block and nowhere to land. Making a carefully executed swing and tether, we reach the next block and swing onwards to land on two more floating grapple blocks. Once again, we have to swing swing from one solitary grapple block to another, this time slightly higher than the first, and finally land on the small metal outcropping in front of a new blue door high above the deep chasm below. This room is huge and definitely tricky if you're having trouble timing your grapple shots. But let's drop down below anyway. There's actually a new enemy we missed floating just below our grapple swinging view. This beige balloon is called a powamp. It inflates like a quillless pufferfish when we get close. Though it almost resembles a miniature phantoon, it instead has 2 eyes and a 3rd tentacle dangling underneath. This is hard to see in game, but its concept art makes this clear. If we fell from above, we can actually grapple the powamp and attempt to fling ourselves high enough upward to try and regain our ground. But if we accidentally shoot the creature, it will explode like a naval mine with a series of spiked projectiles firing in all directions. Interestingly, these odd creatures share the same item drop table as cack attacks, practically guaranteeing super missile refills upon death, an exploitable trick of the species I neglected to mention earlier. And if you think that was just a shameless excuse for me to once again say cack attack, then you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Cack attack. Anyway, I promised you an easy way to reach that door. Dropping all the way back down to the ground past the mossy plateau and through the 3 large triangular mounds, we can reach a long horizontal tunnel leading back to the door we spied on the floor earlier. From this door, run to the right and charge speed booster. Once you reach the 3rd opening in the ceiling, crouch to charge, hold R, face right, and jump, activating a diagonal shine spark, perfectly launching us through the opening, narrowly dodging the cliff's edges, and landing right in front of the door we want. This trick works so well, I have to believe that it was designed for us to discover. If the platforms below weren't sloped just the way they were, or the cliff faces jutted out slightly farther, this wouldn't work. But instead, we've got an awesome foolproof method to reach one of the more difficult doors in the game. Thank you, Shine Spark. Stepping through the next room, we are now surrounded in pink metal braces. The background is shifted into a nasty globular cluster of small brown lumps. Interesting how the signs of one intelligent race's architecture immediately ceases and another's begins. Through the left of 2 openings, a red scissor scuttles down from above, informing us that we can scale this structure. Paying close attention reveals another crawling beneath our feet. Heading up, first we can wall kick to the left channel, or simply use the footholds in the 2nd opening on the right. At the top, we hop through a blue door on the ceiling and take out a couple Skullteras and more sandy flooded caverns. An ouch patrols the right side of the room, and by accident, we might just discover the far wall to be fake while jumping over the creature. Walking through, the camera catches up with us, allowing us to see what we've discovered, a secret alcove holding a missile expansion. Now we know that there will also be false walls hidden throughout these labyrinthian caverns. It would be wise to keep that X-ray scope at the ready. Climbing out of the water, we can work our way up and to the right past several chutes through a sea of vines. The climb eventually drops off into a deep pit with a chute in its basin. Eagerly expecting a secret to be revealed for discovering this suspicious dead end, we look all around with the X-ray scope searching for the point of coming this way, only to be played for fools. There is nothing this way. It truly was just a dead end. Not only is Meridia designed to tease us with unconventional tricks and traps, but it's also meticulously crafted to discourage us. This is a natural underground swamp swarming with its own biodiverse ecosystem. Meridia is under no obligation to acknowledge our efforts. It doesn't care. Climbing back up and around, we can instead take the blue door on the left shore. Inside, we're met with a new buzzing enemy called a menu. In previous games, and even in the Super Metroid's internal files, the menu is instead called a memu. I'm gonna assume that because of this, I'm pronouncing it correctly, considering the alternative is to call it a menu, and we could all do without that needless confusion. Though these things may initially appear to be Meridia's variation of mellow, mechanically behaving the same, buzzing and swooping around, they're surprisingly bizarre the more you look into them. Taking a closer look at the creature's concept artwork implies that it isn't biological at all. Even though its sprite resembles a buzzing quad-winged beetle with a large singular eye, instead the menu artwork makes it appear to actually be a tiny mechanized drone, likely behaving autonomously. Its eye instead appears to be a camera lens, and its wings instead are plated forceps. Jumping ahead a bit to Metroid Fusion, the biological parasites known as the Ects are still able to possess and take the form of the menu, now implying the opposite, that these things actually are biological. Whatever they are, they're weird, uncomfortable, and likely some form form of unnatural artificial life. Could they be builder drones mindlessly excavating rock and minerals from these caverns and constructing the polyhedron obelisks? If that's the case, then at least I don't feel as morally hesitant decommissioning these annoying cybernetic bugs as opposed to some biological species. But that's just my bias toward living things I can relate to. Oh good, this environment was just made by a little flying toaster. Now I don't have to feel bad about killing it, even though I have no way of understanding what life that flying toaster has to begin with. Sorry for digressing so often, this game makes me grapple with the most outlandish of what-ifs. Anyway, working our way to the left, we dodge some burrowing ouches and bomb jump to slide through a morph ball tunnel, exiting into what looks like yet another dead end. Being thorough, we peek ahead with the X-ray scope and luckily discover the room continues through a hidden hallway. Stepping through, we can peek through the collapsed holes of sediment to see a swarm of ouches below us. Farther left, we can open out into a new clearing with a swarm of Manu coming straight through the walls out of nowhere. Dispatching them, we can leap up and around to access yet another blue door at the top left. Leaping over a pair of Zeb nests in the sandy pits, we drop into a deep chasm with a chute at its base. Well, this feels familiar, doesn't it? Another roundabout trip to a chute nest. Investigating anyway, we can spy there actually is a hidden exit this time, underneath the chute's maw at the basin center. Falling through, we land in a small opening where two upgrades are presented on metallic pedestals ripe for the taking. A regular and super missile expansion. The designers could have easily hidden one of these two upgrades at the other chute-guarded cliff basin. But that would defeat the point here. We have been conditioned by Pavlovian responses with these upgrades all game, rewarding us for investigating and exploring. Now, suddenly in Meridia, we might do the exact same thing as before, expecting a reward, but unapologetically get nothing. This is the game coyly asking, why did you expect something there in the first place? And then in a nearly identical situation, we get double the reward. People don't react well to being jerked around like this, and the game knows that if you made it this far, then you've gotten comfortable with how everything works. So now is the time to start changing the rules just enough to get into your head. Heading all the way back to the pink metal pipe room, let's now try shooting the floor where we saw the scissor scuttling below our feet. Exposing an opening, we drop inside and dispose of several red scissors and reach a green door at the right end of the chamber. On the other side is a freezing underwater enclosed metal box with ice-covered lavender bricks enclosed in pink piping dripping with icicles. The background is once again completely different. Now, alternating purple bricks of S and Z tetraminos are constructing a massive wall with seemingly random patches either eroding away their color or protruding away from the wall on the verge of collapse. Once again, we have not seen anything like this at all. Could this be the work of yet another unknown civilization? But the more pressing issue is, how do we get out of here? X-ray scoping the floor indicates a weakness to power bombs, so we drop one and fall through the opening. To our immediate left is a red door, but as we prepare to open it, a new creature begins slithering our way. A hermit crab slug known as a yard attempts to snip at our ankles with its tiny claws. Shooting it causes the yard to retreat inside of its shell, where it can be kicked around the room, making a comically pathetic sound effect. The yard will eventually bravely emerge from its shell in hopes of successfully clipping our hamstrings and pursuing us again, but it is no more lethal as it was before. If we insisted on killing it, a simple morph ball bomb will do the trick, but if this cute little guy at least made you chuckle, the least you can do is spare its life. Unless you truly are a heartless killing machine, then go for it. Taking the red door, we uncover a new save station. Luckily, these have power somehow and still work even under intense water pressure. Checking out the rest of the room, we encounter more yards, where a couple are even slinking up the walls. In the center of this large expanse, we see a tall gray ribbed cylinder in the background. Checking our map, it becomes clear that this is the vertical shuttle elevator we zipped through earlier, meaning that the room above must be the dreaded room with that Metroid look-alike. To our sides are tall metal pipes supported by grapple blocks. We haven't seen the concept fully implemented yet, but it must be possible to scale 90-degree walls utilizing fearing nothing but the grapple beam. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's keep investigating the bottom level. To the right, we pass under an outstretched structure of pipes with a suspicious opening in the bottom. The X-ray scope tells us that the pipes in this hole are destructible by speed booster. Luckily, this room is long and flat, and the enemies are laughable. So we build up a speed booster and launch a shine spark right through the weak spot in the ceiling, where we crash through 6 small pipes and land in front of a missile expansion. Since the entrance sealed behind us, we continue forward only to stumble upon a super missile expansion as well. It sure took a while, but our expedition into Meridia is finally paying its dividends. But that was rather easy for such a helpful pair of upgrades. If you opted to be safe rather than sorry, you'd have discovered that the X-ray scope spied pitfall blocks right in front of this expansion. There was no other way out of here after all. If you fell for this trap, then you've only got yourself to blame. Once we drop through, we land in a new portion of the area next to a blue door to the right. Let's save it for later and instead head left. Though we could drop down and out of this corridor to begin grapple jumping our way up the parallel floating walls, we could also exit this area with a well-timed running jump to simply land on top of the rightmost wall instead. However we do it, we can now see the ceiling is recessed with grapple blocks, allowing us to swing to the next pillar, and then once again to the next, leading to a new blue door on the ceiling. Before we take it though, let's actually check out something interesting to remember for later. Way down in the bottom right of this huge room, you may have actually discovered this first while playing with the yards, but towards the very end of the room, we can actually shoot open an entranceway leading to a long tunnel of sand running beneath the entire room. All I'm gonna say is that we're gonna return to this multiple times later, but for now, let's just log that discovery away and make it back to that top left door, which we can much more easily access by simply wall kicking up the left side. Jumping through the door, what? Metroids? Hold on, something isn't right. To our left and right, 2 Metroid-like creatures are boxed inside of their own pink pipe prisons. Though they appear lively and track us as we move, they don't look quite right. A Metroid has 4 nuclei, but these things only have 1. They're also being stored in freezing temperatures, something we already know to be a weakness of the species. And if we aim and shoot at one of these creatures, their weak pipe walls quickly crumble and they rush us, only to go down in a couple beam shots. Well, this is an interesting turn of events. Time to whip out the manual. Lo and behold, this creature is not a Metroid, but instead an imitation called a Mocktroid. It claims that these creatures are the initial result of space pirates attempting to clone Metroids. Though it's a relief to see that their attempt at replicating Metroids was unsuccessful, the word initial implies that it didn't end here. And the fact that these Mocktroids were being kept in icy liquid storage rooms is proof that the pirates were confident enough to put these newborns through genetic tests in hopes of having them overcome their only weakness. Luckily, it appears that this also stifled their growth, causing only one of their nuclei to properly form. Even if we release a Mocktroid and allow it to try and suck our energy away, it does a lousy job of it. The Mocktroid can't even get a firm grip on us if we move too quickly, and if we stand still, it barely drains our energy at a reasonable pace. B-Toms are better Metroid clones than these pathetic imitations. Even the grapple beam is enough to kill Mocktroids in a single shot. This whole tease of finding actual living Metroids was just another Meridian subversion. Jumping above the right Mocktroid's enclosure, we can start making our way through this room eastward. As we shoot our way through the brittle pipework, we defeat another Mocktroid and cleave a path forward, but also stumble down through a pitfall trap. Continuing right, we reach another Mocktroid enclosure and can choose to try going above or below it. Going above, we might be surprised to find a couple of red Puyos locked away here as well. Whether these things were intentionally stored here or they wriggled their way in by their own volition isn't clear. A pitfall trap above the 4th Mocktroid cell suddenly pins us face to face with one of the creatures, but luckily it goes down just as effortlessly as the last of the batch. The other side of the cell caves in, dropping us into the channel below. The rightmost wall appears to be destructible with speed booster, so with that knowledge we work our way backwards, clearing the path of pipes and debris in order to charge up a sprint and crash through 2 walls right in front of a blue door at the end. Though the rest of Meridia was a mysterious ghost house of archaeology, it's evident that we have finally made progress toward uncovering a secret space pirate research laboratory. If this is where the larva Metroid was taken, the pirate scientists worked incredibly quickly, accelerating the growth of their newly conceived clones in just a matter of hours. If these are the discarded failed clones, then are we too late in stopping the incubation of full strength ones? We have to hurry onward to find out. In the next room, we are boxed into a small icy chamber with holes bored in the crusty blue biomass making up the background. The familiar uncomfortable music from the Spore Spawn boss fight plays as a long striped red serpent slithers around the room from one hole to another. This menacing fanged sea snake has glowing green eyes and a long flowing parapodium running down the length of its body, flapping in rhythm to quickly swim in any direction like a sea slug. Its tail fin is strangely round and appears unused in swimming. Obviously, this sea serpent isn't content with us intruding on its territory, attempting to ram us and occasionally spit a wave of green thorned orbs from the safety of its burrows. This is Botwoon, likely another creation of the space pirate bioweapons researchers. Only its head is vulnerable, so we'll need to make every shot count as Botwoon accelerates its attacks the more damage it sustains. As it nears death, Botwoon will turn dark red and speed around the room recklessly in hopes of thrashing its way to victory. This fight gets drastically more dangerous the faster Botwoon moves, as it becomes challenging to land a clear shot on his head as he tears around the room. One final blast will freeze Botwoon in place before each segment of its body crumbles to the floor and explodes from head to tail. Pickups appear restocking our health and ammunition, and the far right wall collapses, allowing us access to proceed. Once again, we were forced to kill another space pirate science project just to pass. The fact that the pirates are using these innocent creatures as defensive weapons guarding their headquarters is beyond repulsive. I'd like to hope that this is a violation of some sort of intergalactic law in the future. We need more validation that we stand on the moral high ground over our unconventional enemies as it is. In the room following, we eliminate a handful of red Puyos and investigate the changing scenery. The purple Tetramino bricks are falling apart in huge chunks, exposing a dark rocky mountain behind it. It's also clear there is an intense shadow cast from the bricks to the rock wall, illuminating the depth of the crumbling facade. The icy lavender bricks are slowly enveloped in rocky sand the further we move right. We can even see scattered stones from the cavities in the wall that have made their way over to our feet. This structure was either ancient or repurposed and partially destroyed. Stepping forward, we have no choice but to wade through quicksand, and once we do, we will immediately notice an energy tank above our heads and a wall blocking our path. We can sink below the first wall and try and sneak by, but another thicker wall impedes our path out of the quicksand, and by this point, we have already started to sink deep into the sand trap. Sinking below, we pass through an underground sinkhole where bulls attempt to ram us. Below, we are spat out of the ceiling, landing in another sandfall home to a nest of Zoa. We have nowhere to go but left from here, passing another Zoa-filled sandpit. This is where we would have fallen had we not made it past the first wall before the energy tank above we couldn't grab. Past this is a sandy pit with multiple Zoa emerging simultaneously, and finally an Ouch patrols the rocky substrate near a blue door at its end. This door spits us out in a familiar space, the large icy yard room. Knowing now that the right room was nothing but a trap, we head back above, hoping to find another way past the quicksand blockade. This time, after clearing out the Puyos, we build up speed and dash across the sand, letting Speed Booster break down both walls, and a third long blockade that would have completely sealed off access to the right had we somehow managed to make it farther than we did. Though this leads us to a new blue door, we're not forgetting about that energy tank. Heading back, we leap above 5 Zoa patrolling their nest and land on a ledge, inviting us inside with a morph ball-sized cubbyhole. By rolling inside, we slide through a hidden passageway that requires us to drop bombs to jump up and through even more hidden channels. Once the energy tank comes into view, we might excitedly continue bombing and rolling straight towards it, but if we do, we'll only fall victim to a false floor, dropping us right back into the sinkhole. Instead, let's use our X-ray scope to spy how to outsmart this trap. There are 2 solutions. One involves bombing and rolling left once we drop into the beginning of the trick hole near the tank to continue on and nab it. The other option is even more fun. We also spied the tunnel to the left of the tank was also a hidden passageway. By making a running jump from the left side, we can enter Morph Ball and slide straight in to grab the energy tank hassle-free. Meridia may be a trap-infested labyrinth, but once we learn its tricks, it becomes a new type of challenge, trying to outsmart the obstacles it throws our way. Exiting to the left, we are ambushed by a charging Metroid in a tall mechanical vertical shaft devoid of platforms. Jumping up high for a better look, we can catch the attention of another Metroid. There was a locked door lodged in the wall high up to our left, and grapple blocks stretching up the length of each side, with the door opening being the only exception. But before we ascend, let's instead investigate the bottom of the room. Our map clued us into there being something else in this direction, and our mini-map in the top right should instigate our curiosity. In the far right corner, we can roll through a hidden tunnel into a secret room I'd honestly forgotten existed for the better part of 15 years. Can you blame me? That vertical room with Metroids was so distracting, it's a wonder to even discover such a well-disguised path. Inside, we slide through, jump over, and maneuver around some pipes before reaching a long, narrow straightaway home to a unique creature seen nowhere else in the game. This huge armored isopod, called an rolls back and forth in its long metal trench. There is only a tiny portion of height of the room that the creature does not occupy, so in order to pass, Samus must try to morph ball bomb jump over this oversized pillbug. But by trying this for too long, the will reach out for the morph ball with its many tendrils, making it resemble a hungry nautilus rather than a crustacean. The is completely invincible. Don't bother trying to defeat it, or even push it back like a work robot. Instead, we must leap over them in order to reach the other side of the room. Or we could exploit a weird glitch where jumping into the and aiming down causes Samus to clip right through them without taking any damage. It's a little safer and faster, but it's also a little immersion breaking to say the least. There are a total of 3 in this cramped canal, but once we make it past them all, we can reach a new blue door at its end, leading us into a deep blue missile restock station. It would be wise to stock up for the road ahead, but keep in mind these stations only refill our regular missiles and not our supers. Heading back, we could reluctantly take the same difficult infested path, or fire out of frustration after realizing this was just a dead end, only to destroy the pipes beneath the raised hallway. Running all the way back through, we build speed booster and smash our way through the initial pipe work that forced us into the path of to begin with. Convenient little escape strategy. Back in the tall grapple-walled Metroid pit, we notice some interesting changes to the familiar purple bricked backdrop. The crumbling exposed sections have been crudely patched up with a different, messily arranged series of purple stones. This may be easy to miss, as they are nearly the same color as the original bricks, but there's also an icy waterfall cascading down this room, and once we reach the top and dispose of a third Metroid, we can see the frozen mouth of the waterfall along the ceiling. At the top, we land directly in front of a new blue door, and through it the room looks strikingly similar to the last one. A Metroid charges us straight away, and we are standing on the other side of the tall grapple block plated wall, with more icy waterfalls running down the crumbling purple facade. The differences become apparent as we take the plunge down the shaft before us, where we land in quicksand with more Metroids charging us from both sides. Once we regain our footing on an exposed pipe, we can see that the room is half flooded due to the flowing water. Since we don't see another platform ahead of us, we opt to swing from the grapple block hoisted just below water level like a buoy. Unfortunately, it is also equipped with spikes on top, so swinging up and around to land on top of it isn't an option. Instead, we swing onward to the upcoming tower of grapple blocks. Here, we must release the grapple and jump away from the wall to either grapple back again up higher in order to gain ground, retract the beam slack to jump away from the wall to gain height, or simply wall jump to the top. Though Metroids litter this enormous room, keeping our grapple beam at the ready is actually the quickest way to put them down in a single shot while still focusing on our climbs. This time when we drop down to the other side of the pillar, we have to wade further through quicksand before finding an even smaller pipe to regain our footing. Above and to either side of us are grapple blocks. The left is for retreating, and the right is another spiked buoy. Going for another dangerous swing, we realize the upcoming pillar is taller than the last and only has grapple blocks at the top, meaning we will have to gather our momentum and make a leap of faith to snag one of those blocks to help us reach the top. Either that, or we once again simply wall kick our way up. Sure, this sounds like the easier option, but trying to wall kick out of the quicksand isn't very practical. Luckily, none of these sand traps actually lead anywhere. Once we do make it to the top of this second pillar, stop and take a breather. If you thought those last 2 climbs were tough, you're going to need all of your mental strength in order to make it over this last one. Below us, we can already see another, albeit slightly larger larger spike-topped set of grapple blocks. Leaping below and looking around, it quickly becomes apparent that we aren't even being given the courtesy of a safe place to stand this time at all. Not only that, but we need to swing from the first point to another higher pair of spiked-capped blocks to advance. Once we reach these, the real trouble begins. The upcoming pillar we must climb juts out at the top towards us, making wall climbs especially difficult. Not only that, but we have one and only one grapple block to latch onto near the very top. So we swing with everything we have and pray we don't miss this shot, or else we'll have to wade our way back left and out of the muck to try it all again. Once we snag the block, we can either spin jump up and around to reach the precipice, or release some slack and kick off the wall to gain momentum and front flip our way up top. Honestly, this is quite a challenge to do on your first time, so expect to see the bottom of this sand pit several times before you make it up and over. Speaking of, the bottom of this room's background has been getting more and more destroyed the farther we progressed. We must be approaching something substantial. Once we do make it to the top, we will be fortunate to finally spy some grapple blocks on the ceiling. You're likely going to take any option that doesn't involve underwater quicksand at this rate, so let's swing across, landing in front of a red door. Punching 5 missiles into it, we reach a new save room with an additional room connected to its right. Inside, we discover another dark blue refilling station, but this time for energy. You probably took more damage from the last room's spikes than the Metroids, but a refill is always welcome. We did just take down Botwoon after all, so we stock up on health and lock in our progress. Back in the huge icy room, we drop down to discover a green door just below us. Popping a super missile into it, we emerge into an icy hallway with spikes lining the floor and a grapple swing above. The backdrop is now a murky cyan with hundreds of oyster shells or haphazardly arranged stones amassed on the far wall. Swinging across the gap, we can see a cracked grapple block in the ceiling above with even more spikes below. Swinging across, we are surprised to reach a dead end. Shooting around will uncover a hidden missile expansion in the wall we can grab, but that's dishearteningly underwhelming considering how much effort we put into making it this far. Since the grapple block above us broke, we are likely just to jump into the spikes, hoping to soak up the damage, only to find out that nothing happened to us. Why are we standing in spikes without getting injured? The X-ray scope shows us that the spikes weren't real, or rather just in the foreground. Now suddenly suspicious of the previous pit, we check it out as well, realizing that not only were those spikes also just for show, but there are hidden gaps in the floor where we can fall through. Can we just step back and appreciate how genius that was? The only reason we just discovered this cryptic path was due to one crumbling grapple block. Making that dejected jump back into the spikes only to realize that they weren't even real causes such a flurry of emotions from frustration to elation. I live for the brilliant breadcrumbing this game uses to nudge us into discovering secrets. Too many games nowadays don't have half the confidence Super Metroid has in its design psychology. Dropping through the hidden gap, we land on a small icy platform, but the room still continues even deeper below the chilly water surface. Dropping lower still, we land right in front of another Ghidorah with nowhere to hide. Keeping our composure, we exploit the creature's openings to quickly take it down. If what we've learned about Ghidorahs is correct, then this one may be guarding the entrance to our third space pirate elite. Taking a deep breath, we slowly step through the door. Immediately, the boss theme from Ridley's Attack on the Ceres Colony picks up as we step into a bizarre mechanical golden room. Though this crazy room begs to be examined closely, this isn't the time. We step off the high ledge and fall into a wide open arena with a swarm of Avirs swimming together erratically from left to right as if in a school. They are non-hostile and resist our weaponry, so ignoring them, we turn our attention to the next potential hazard. On the walls encasing the arena are 2 advanced electrical turrets on either side, which occasionally fire dangerous balls of blue lightning at Samus if left alone. The 2 on the right are slightly lower than the 2 on the left, but by jumping high enough, we can see that the upper left turret is damaged and no longer firing at us. Clued into the solution, we take aim at each of the remaining turrets and destroy them with 3 missiles or a single super missile each. By this point, the Avirs have scurried away off screen, and without warning, a massive mutated Avir swoops in from the left, headed right for us. From the pitch black background, the creature continues taking hasty swipes at us before retreating out of sight. This grotesque green mutant is Dragon. Though its thick green plating is seemingly indestructible, its soft yellow underbelly isn't. So anticipating its attacks, we can manage to sneak in a few missiles and charge beam strikes. The safest option is to aim and fire at its stomach during the beginning of this attack, and quickly enter Morph Ball to dodge it. Draygon is fast, and it's only getting faster the more we damage it. To make matters even worse, Draygon occasionally changes up its strategy and slowly glides from one side of the screen to the other, releasing gray clumps of sticky mucus into the room. We can shoot them away for some pickups, or even more efficiently clear them all out with a single power bomb at the expense of the refill drops. This gives us a clear shot to Draygon's veiny yellow stomach, landing some heavy extra hits. However, the mucus is pretty hard to avoid, and you're almost certainly going to get snagged with its sticky hold eventually. And when you do, movement is almost completely restricted, and Draygon quickly pounces on our vulnerability and grabs us. In a fight all about speed, Draygon wasn't taking any chances and slowed us down even more in order to ensnare and capture us. Floating up into the middle of the room, Draygon swirls us in an increasingly erratic spiral pattern, occasionally stopping to skewer us with its blade-like lobster tail fin. We are helpless to this attack, unless we thrash and fight back. Once a total of 60 directional input button presses have been made, we finally break free of Draygon's sticky grasp. If we can't do it in time, Draygon will finish off its sinister attack with 3 devastatingly strong tail skewers in succession before dropping us back into the pit, behaving like a bored predator, hoping for a final exciting chase before it fatally ensnares its prey one last time. What is this overgrown Avir that actually set up or laid in wait inside of a booby-trapped arena in order to trap and kill Samus? Time to do a little reading. The manual only states that Draygon has an armor-like shell, which gives it a lot of defensive strength. Well, that wasn't exactly helpful. It does, however, provide an illustration of the creature, which, I've gotta say, looks tremendously less frightening than the real deal. Instead of being smooth and cartoony, Draygon is crusty, veiny, and menacing. Instead of its eyes being light blue with black pupils, they are actually green with bright red, bloodshot veins leading to a hideous chameleon-like bulging pupil. Most disturbingly, its shell is actually far more detailed and grungy than in the illustration, with the most terrifying feature of all practically going completely understated in the illustration. Draygon's head has several large, protruding, human-shaped skulls emerging through bulging veins and tendrils. Their faces, though skeletal, are clearly frozen in agony after whatever horrific experiment caused this repulsive conjoint cranial effect. The Super Metroid Player's Guide calls Draygon a foul-tempered mutant, confirming that some sort of hideous composite malfeasance was at play. This unsettling skull brings to mind the similarly conjoined wailing skulls of the Covern from the wrecked ship. The Covern may have been what became of the human refuse required to perfect the biological enhancements Draygon pursued. We don't know what this means, what connections this implies, or what this accomplishes for Draygon, but even if it was simply done to frighten Samus, it has a nauseating effect, to say the least. Any intelligent race going to such extreme measures as to alter their physical appearance by symbiotically conjoining with the body parts of another species is abhorrent. Draygon is clearly intelligent, choosing to fight us here in a prepared open space where it can catch Samus off guard and quickly ensnare her in its thick mucus and dash in for the kill. As the skirmish progresses, Draygon's yellow body becomes a deep blood red. But like some of the other bosses, it doesn't end there. As Draygon nears defeat, its belly will split open and cave in with a massive hole as we forcefully and quite gruesomely penetrate its gut. It can be heard roaring with excitement as it impales us with its tail, taking pleasure in the hunt. This roar was actually sampled from Anguirus, an ankylosaur kaiju from the Godzilla films, heard as early as the 1950s. Oddly enough, we can also see Draygon leave a trail of bubbles coming from its circular, thorny mouth as it swims around the room. This implies that Draygon actually has lungs rather than gills and requires air to breathe. From what we could gather, this room is completely flooded, so Draygon must be taking breaths out of sight as it speeds through the room. Once the final hit has landed, Draygon whines in agony while its eyes roll back into its head. Explosions roll out all around its body as it slowly sinks to the bottom of the sand with only its head poking out. For a brief moment, its eye opens wide and peers right at us, looking straight through the fourth wall. This is the only moment that its eyes leave its target of Samus and instead turn their sights on us. us, the player. It's unnerving, even in death. As the music transitions into the item room jingle, stirred up sand billows around the corpse as the 6 Avir from earlier return and solemnly bury Dragon in the abyss. With the creatures gone, pickups appear over our head and the doors unlock. Because of this emotional moment from the morning Avir, fans have taken to referring to Dragon as their mother, and therefore as a female. However, the Super Metroid Player's Guide and developer interviews both contradict this, directly calling Dragon a he. It is still possible Dragon was the father of the Avir, and their reaction was still that of children after losing a parent. Some elephants and chimpanzees, as well as other intelligent creatures on Earth, have funeral rituals for their dead, so watching another species do it as well means that not only are the Avir intelligent, but they deeply cared for Dragon. He may have been more than just a commander of intelligent scientific experimental forces. He may really have been their father. All we know of Dragon were context clues, and this sad moment of mourning leaves us questioning the effects of our slaughter. Are we really doing the right thing when doing the right thing means destroying families? What have we done? Did Dragon really need to die? Is there no such thing as imprisonment or justice in a world with dozens of highly intelligent alien races? Even if those wailing human skulls lodged in Dragon's head could speak and wish for its brutal murder, doesn't executing him in the first place make us just as guilty as he ever was? We have caused nothing but damage to the inhabitants of Zebes since we've landed, all for a selfish goal of slaughtering our way into reclaiming one tiny Metroid. Never mind how many intelligent species we've killed so far, we have destroyed families, killed indiscriminately, and never batted an eye while doing it. Maybe this is why these alien races hate humans so much. Maybe we aren't so different after all. Well, it's too late to turn back now. Our actions might very well have started an intergalactic war. We might as well continue fighting for the home team, as only the winners of a war will be the ones to write history, and surely no one but Samus will recall the plight of the Avir, spawn of Dragon, orphaned in the name of heroic retention of peace. For humans, at least. Stepping through the unlocked door to our left, we are met with another Chozo statue holding the prize Dragon was hoarding from us with such tenacity. Claiming it, we have acquired the Space Jump. This incredible upgrade increases the spinning speed of Samus's spin jump, blurring her image as she spins. I'm not sure how any living being with liquid blood could withstand being spun around at such high G-forces without passing out, but let's just chalk that up to magic Chozo DNA or another mysterious feature of the gravity suit. While spin jumping, Samus can now jump any number of additional times as long as she jumps in rhythm after each consecutive jump. As long as we jump a short time after the apex of our jump, the next jump will work. Otherwise, we will plummet back down. This amazing upgrade just nullified the need for the high jump boots, the grapple beam, and wall kicking for traversal. If there were any upgrades that you found particularly tricky to grab in high places like the missile expansions lodged in walls in Norfair and the west of the wrecked ship, then this is your answer. Armed with this new technique, let's finally take a better look at Dragon's arena. Aside from the blue electrified short-circuiting turrets and jet black background, this room is entirely monochromatic. Even the sandy floor appears to have a golden shimmer. Along the floor are unusual pipes lathered with dripping mucus, as well as the crumbling bodies of many decaying familiar enemies. We can clearly identify several scissors below, and even one above by the entrance. And just in case you didn't realize yet, the only way to escape this room is by utilizing Space Jump, a neat little safety measure. Anyway, along with the decaying husks of scissors, we can also make out what look like ribs or fangs poking out of the sand below. This room may have also served as a feeding ground for the Avir, and if that's the case, what if the Avir weren't hauling Dragon's body away to mourn him, but to consume him? Clearly they fed on wildlife in this room, and we have no indication that the Avir weren't cannibalistic in any way. This is an alien species after all. They might simply see it as being resourceful. Wow, we're just smothered with comforting thoughts in this room. Aside from the unique fungus growing off of the discarded carcasses below, there's not much else to see. Near the middle of the room, we can see two disconnected thin pipes with layers of mucus dripping down their sides like clumpy icicles. Above them in the foreground are a series of floating scattered cubes of various sizes sizes arranged in such a way that brings the polyhedron monuments to mind. Could the Avir have been the advanced race constructing those things? If so, why do these look so different? Their locking brick structure calls to mind the Tetramino bricks. Any way you try to dissect it, these floating cubes illustrate the unknowable architecture and technology of an alien race. These could be computers, power generators, gravestones, or more likely, something otherworldly that we don't even have a suitable word for. Along the ceiling and walls, we can see bolts running along seams holding the room together. Large egg-like ovals are hoisted on the ceiling, and in the top left corner, an easy-to-miss unique sprite shows what could have been a fifth turret angled down. Returning to the entrance platform, we can see the same wiring that the other corner has. However, there isn't a turret installed here at all. Considering the damaged turret upon entering in this missing spot, it's likely that Dragon was actively preparing for our arrival and was caught partially unprepared while completing this death trap. This was the first time that we've had the opportunity to alter a boss arena to our advantage, so as far as mechanics go, that was pretty cool. It's not often that we are forced to think on the fly environmentally while also trying to learn a new boss's pattern at the same time. Now, speaking of the turrets, we need to talk about something almost anyone experienced with this boss fight has been expecting me to cover. That's right, we are going right back into the fight to play out an alternative method to defeat Dragon. While Dragon has us in his clutches, if we select our grapple beam and fire a tether directly at one of the destroyed turrets, a powerful bolt of electricity will travel through our body and fry the big shrimp instantly. Even at full health, Dragon can't survive for any longer than 4 seconds while getting his own death traps turned against him. Though this does damage Samus, the vast majority of the current is harmlessly flowing through us and going straight to Dragon's gut, the very place he was clutching us against during the attack. It's a cathartic, super satisfying, and simple secret takedown method. Once you taste the power of this quick kill method, you'll likely never try beating Dragon any other way, unless of course you skipped the grapple beam. But what if I told you there was yet another way? Yep, let's keep killing Dragon for science. So in the internal data, Dragon is highly susceptible to taking the electrical damage from the turrets, but he also has another peculiar weakness: shine sparks. Dragon is the only boss to take an additional 50% damage from shine sparks, but the room isn't quite long enough to build up a shine spark, and neither are the 2 neighboring rooms. Was this a mistake by the developers? Quite the opposite. The developers were so clever, they knew that players might find a way to exploit shine sparks in ways they didn't intend, so they encouraged this behavior by making their secret alternative kill boss have an even more cryptic secret kill method. But how do you do it? Technically, you don't actually need to be holding run continuously for a speed booster to charge. There is a specific frame of Samus's running animation where the game is checking whether or not we are holding run in order to build up speed booster. This means that if we anticipate these frames and tap run as we pick up speed during them, we can actually build up speed booster by running a shorter distance than usual. This is because we aren't accelerating the entire time, but instead only while run is being held. By tapping run 2 or 3 times at the right frames and holding on the last tap, we can successfully build up and charge a speed booster even in this boss arena. Now the only problem comes in execution. After disabling the turrets, we have a moment of peace to practice before Dragon makes his first flyby swipe at us. Once the Avir are gone, we know he is coming any second now, so we short charge up a speed booster with the tap method and prepare to fire ourselves at the monster. Landing these shine sparks during his swipes can be tough if we aim vertically, though these are the easiest to execute. The most efficient method is to spin jump in the air and do a mid-air horizontal shine spark right at Dragon's face. The window to connect with a horizontal attack rather than a vertical one is much wider if you are comfortable with attempting it during a boss fight. You'd think hitting the weak stomach would be ideal, but the rules change a bit when attacking with shine sparks. Instead of dealing regular impact damage, we are actually dealing damage per frame of connection. The after images we emit after the attack are actually huge damage dealers as well, and can damage Dragon even if we miss if we are lucky enough. As for the new weak spot, since we are dealing dealing damage per frame, we want to be in contact with as much of Dragon as possible during the attack. It turns out that a couple of his hitboxes overlap around his head and neck area. During his mucus flinging attack, Dragon slows down considerably, making aiming for his head even easier. If we are really skilled or lucky, we can shine spark right at the perfect spot to kill Dragon in a single hit. Otherwise, you will likely have to get him 3 or 4 times. Yes, this secret method has the potential to be even faster than the 4-second electrocution method. But if Dragon is feeling particularly conniving, he might actually manage to catch you mid-shine spark if you connect with a horizontal attack during the beginning of his mucus spraying sweep. You might have thought you aced the shrimp in one crushing blow, but he somehow just caught you like a bullet right out of the air. This is due to the mucus overriding the shine spark while colliding with the wall. This troublesome circumstance also has the potential to allow your after images to live on, following your movements against the wall until you fulfill their purpose by activating a new shine spark. Not only did Dragon just perform what might be the most impressive feat in the series, catching a shine sparking Samus like she were a flying beach ball, but now our graphics are having a conniption fit simply trying to understand what just happened. Now, before we let Dragon finally rest in peace, you might encounter an incredible glitch while shine sparking during the final blow. If you are not running or moving in any way before the shine spark and land the finishing blow, Dragon's death animation will override our shine spark and force us into a standing position without fully disabling the effects of Speed Booster. What results is a permanent state of the full flashing blue suit Speed Booster, but without the need to maintain it. Though we lose this effect by jumping from a standstill, inadvertently activating a shine spark releasing the energy, this means that we now have one free shine spark to use wherever we want. A great choice is across the long grapple-lined Metroid room, saving a ton of time on backtracking. But keep in mind that while using Speed Booster fully charged, we are virtually invincible, instantly destroying any enemies and obstacles that so much as come into contact with us. We basically just grabbed a star from Super Mario Bros. That will never run out until we activate Shine Spark. Keep in mind that running will also reset the checks for maintaining Blue Suit, and crouching will store the energy, ending the effect. Standing in unstable ground like quicksand will also disable the Blue Suit. If we are careful, we can bring Blue Suit Samus pretty much anywhere we want in the game, though most players and speedrunners utilize this glitch to Shine Spark across the long Metroid room previously mentioned. Be wary that since this is a long Shine Spark, you need to have ample HP in order to survive the whole trip. Alright, now with all of that out of the way, there is one last thing I'd like to talk about in Dragon's fight. I promise we won't be killing him again. If we ignore the turrets when we first enter and instead carefully watch the erratically swimming Avir, we might notice that their swimming isn't so random after all. In fact, they seem to be spelling out something as they swim from left to right. The words Keiko Love are written in the air before they retreat off screen. Development programmer Yasuhiko Fuji laboriously scripted this dance at night secretly in hopes that nobody would notice. The message was intended for his girlfriend at the time named Keiko. You know your man loves you when he secretly choreographs a swarm of alien shrimp. Speaking of the Avir once more, these particular ones look a little different than the hostile ones we've encountered previously. These Avir are dark green, similarly colored to Dragon, but the hostile ones are a sandy beige. There must be different classes or sub-races of Avir throughout Meridia. Finally armed with our new space jump, we trivialize the return trip up to the entrance, the previous Ghidorah room with the false spikes, and the long journey across the Metroid pit. Few upgrades have this substantial of an impact on our traversal. Returning to almost any room in the game now feels especially satisfying as we belittle past obstacles by zipping right over them. This isn't the only thing that's changed after defeating Dragon. On our way back in the tall grapple-lined room, the locked door halfway up the left wall is now flashing, just like the door in Kraid's lair that lit up after his defeat. Using Space Jump to leap inside, we land in a huge, treacherous room with tall jumps above spike pits, both raised and lowered. Luckily, we couldn't enter this without Space Jump, as wall kicking in here would have been madness, especially due to the new violet cack-attacks scattered across the room. These regional variants adapting to the icy falls of Meridia are here to stamp out the thought we had that Space Jump would solve all of our problems for traversal. If one of their needles connects with us while spin jumping, we will recoil and lose the spin, knocking us straight out of the air. This is made even more troublesome in a room filled with spikes. Past the first frosted brick structure, we can choose to either go above or below the next one. Above lies a spike pit with another patrolling Kakatak. Below are two, one on the ground and one climbing on the ceiling. But at least there aren't any spikes to worry about. The next structure is a huge wall coming down from the ceiling with only a small opening at the bottom. Landing on a single brick amidst the spike pit, we can now choose to scale up the next tall brick wall or maneuver under it. If you're low on super missiles, I'd recommend going up and killing each Kakatak you find in order to restock. Once we reach a small exposed tunnel to the right, we defeat another thorn-spitting cactus and roll through. Jumping above the spikes below, we space jump all the way up to a blue door at the end. Through it, we manage 4 more violet Kakataks as we navigate down a shaft filled with pink pipework as the bricks erode away and sandy rubble overtakes the bottom of the room. Stepping through the blue door following, we are spat out into a familiar space. Pulling up our map, we can confirm that we have come full circle, all the way back to the basin of the very first sand trap in Meridia. Remember when we first passed through, the right door was locked. With Dragon's defeat, the shortcut path to his arena is now unlocked. If you recall, there was also a third locked door just past this room, high above the viney water surface. Using space jump, we effortlessly scale the sheer cliff and excitedly confirm our suspicion. This door has also been unlocked after Dragon's defeat. Heading through, we arrive in a tall, mossy tinted root system reaching high up into another sandy cliff face. Though there are many small platforms and nooks in the walls to land on, the real struggle of this room is in avoiding contact with the erratically moving chutes and poyos placed all over this cave. The lesson of this room is in realizing that establishing a safe place to fall could help you ascend with space jump even better than simply jumping as quickly as you can. Inevitably, you're going to get knocked about by one of these horizontally bouncing baddies, so slowly rising up the shaft by clearing the way first allows us to retain our spin jumps and reach the top where a blue door awaits us. Through it, we pass inside a densely overgrown tunnel with a lumpy pile of white jiggling jelly undulating on its own. These pale globs are actually a rare variant of poyos. They are completely non-hostile, and their immature behavior and lack of color implies that these may actually be a cluster of newborns, left incubating in a pile in this secluded, densely vegetated space. And just for the sake of convenience, nearly all players passing through this cave will instinctively gun them down to clear a path forward. And due to the large pile, the front puyos take the first hits, body blocking the others like a meat shield. You have to deliberately continue firing at this helpless pile of infants to clear the way forward. It feels like stomping on a bird's nest just because it was on the sidewalk. I can only hope puyos aren't intelligent enough to understand or mourn the loss of their own children. Entering the next room, the door locks behind us as we stand on a cliff face with a new magenta space pirate firing beams at us from across a large gap. Firing back, it seems like none of our ammunition has any effect on the menace, so dropping down the cliff to avoid it, we land near more invincible pirates, so our only choice is to run. Dropping down in another opening in the ground, we land near another magenta pirate on a metal grating supported by thick pipes, and just to our right is a Chozo statue. Quickly grabbing the upgrade, we acquire the plasma beam. Immediately, we turn to the approaching pirate and fire away, freezing it solid before destroying it in a few rapid-fire bursts. The plasma beam appears to be an incredibly powerful armor-penetrating laser that can rip right through these tough pirates, allowing us to hunt each one of them down and clear the room. Working our way back up and defeating all of the pirates along the way unlocks the door above where we pass the respawned Poyo nest. Firing our newly upgraded gun obliterates the entire mound of Poyos in an instant. Now we're talking about some serious firepower. As depressing as the concept of slaughtering helpless creatures is, they were placed here for us to immediately feel the difference in our new strength. Dropping through the next room, we now realize that a single charge shot from the plasma beam can overpower the ice beam's freezing ability, killing weak enemies in one shot. Previously, you may have noticed that some enemies that died in a single shot before ice beam suddenly required at least 2 with the ice beam. This was to ensure that we didn't accidentally destroy enemies we were intending to use as makeshift platforms. With plasma beam, we obviously defeated Dragon and acquired the space jump, so the ice beam's freezing mechanic has already already been made obsolete. Now I know it's been a while, but since we've just acquired our final beam weapon upgrade, this means that we now have access to our final charge beam combo. By deactivating our wave, ice, and spacer beams, we select power bombs and charge away. 4 green pulsating rings quickly orbit around Samus, then move in tandem while spinning outward, then back in before making one final bounce outward, flying away completely. This special attack has been unofficially translated from the official guidebook for Super Metroid as Emerald Splash. As with Asteroid Belt and Stardust Shower, the 4 particles we generate with this attack each carry the damage equivalent to a super missile. However, what the Emerald Splash has over the other beam combos is that the rings carry plasma beam properties, continuing through any enemies it makes contact with, destroying any others in its path as well. Unfortunately, this is also the shortest charge beam combo, lasting only a couple seconds. Though it's flashy and destructive, at this stage in the game, it's a little underwhelming. At least Emerald Splash comes with a creepy whirring sound effect and a really cool name. Now's a good time to backpedal all the way to the large frozen room with the yards to investigate that suspicious opening in the bottom right of the room. The fastest way back here is to retread through the Violet Cacatak room, turn back to the path to Botwoon, and intentionally fall into the sand traps beneath the speed booster blockades. Trust me, this part is about to be a real hassle if you don't intimately know your way around this labyrinth yet. Shooting open the pipe, we drop down to the icy sand-lined basin of the room where we begin working our way to the left. Running along, playfully punting a yard, we reach a long sand pit and start sinking. Much quicker than the other sand pits, we are sucked down through another long cave-in where bulls charge us on the way down. Luckily, the plasma beam easily dispatches these pests in a single shot. At the basin, we sink down and spill into a new room, riding the sandfall to the bottom. Though we fall in another sand trap, this one isn't sucking us in completely. On the descent, we spied a missile expansion on the left side, so working our way up to the left narrow shaft, we can claim the upgrade. However, there is still more to see in this hidden rocky cavern. To the right of the sandfall, we can take a look at the rest of the room, a rocky maze leading to a power bomb expansion. Leaping up the leftmost entrance shaft to the maze, we drop down on a group of pitfall blocks, sending us back to the sandy floor. Trying again, this time we avoid the trap and jump to the next ledge where just past it a boulder falls from the crumbling cave ceiling. Quickly dashing to avoid it, we trip into another pitfall trap, sending us falling right past the real tunnel to the upgrade, landing on another pitfall trap, locking us below where we have to work our way through the morph ball tunnel to find a final pitfall trap to escape and try a third time. This time, when we reach the second trap, we preemptively enter morph ball, roll into the trap, and quickly roll back to the left side to slide through the opening, landing right on our shiny new power bomb expansion. From here, we can either shoot or bomb the block to our left and work our way back out of this maze for good. At ground level, only one portion of the quicksand really takes us through the floor and into another room, and fortunately it's to the far right side, assuming that we didn't accidentally fall through while exploring this environment. Sliding down through the hole, we fall through a sandfall in a rocky green room with a Veers retreating into the sand pits below. This time, armed with our new plasma beam, we can obliterate these pesky oversized shrimp with a single explosive blast. If we travel left, we can pass a blue door and familiarize our surroundings. This is the door we ignored a while back, just below the exit to the vertical elevator shaft. Returning to the Avir Sandfall room, we space jump through the falling sand and over an otherwise inaccessibly high platform between two sandfalls, reaching a blue door at its end. Entering this room unprepared is just a pain and isn't exactly worth the effort before space jump, so that's why we shelved it when we did. The next room is a small enclosure with a brittle grapple block above, a sandpit below, and a blue door across the gap. With space jump, we ignore the hazard and progress east to another similarly small enclosure, but this time it's a dead end. Shooting the ceiling at this point, we can jump up to a pair of undamaged blocks and discover that there actually is a new door this way. However, it's above another metal ceiling that appears to be unbreakable. We're also met with some new green poyos hiding up near this forgotten little nook. The X-ray scope at this moment shows us that the only way through this metal beam is down through pitfall blocks on the left. Realizing we've discovered the exit, we backtrack to the last room and look for a way up. Suddenly, it becomes obvious why the single grapple block was brittle. By grappling and intentionally breaking the block, we expose a hole in the ceiling. Before the block respawns, we must space jump through the hole to land above the ceiling, continuing high above into more mossy green caverns. Though it's possible to make it up here before space jump with some tenacious wall kicking, I don't recommend it. I spent way too long stubbornly doing this myself years back just to confirm that it was possible. Unfortunately for me, making it through the hole we made in the ceiling wasn't even the hardest part. From here, we space jump or wall kick if we're mule-headed all the way up this sheer cliff, and at the top we are savagely ambushed by a small swarm of menus. They will almost certainly knock you all the way back down this pit, and since they are too high up, we can't shoot them from below in hopes of clearing the path. Your best bet is in charging up your beam first and pseudo-screw attacking your way up to nullify the first menu's attack, and by that point, you've probably already made it to solid ground. That is unless you decided to wall kick all the way up. Then this climb becomes substantially harder. Once we reach the top and dispatch the menus, we find a few more green puyos as we drop through 1, 2, then 3 consecutive floors with pitfall traps. We land in front of that new blue door, taking care not to trip in the 4th pitfall trap below. Inside, we appear to be trapped in a small rocky enclosure with a peculiar spherical robot with 2 spiked arms made of orbs, ending with large circular saws for hands. This odd mechanical device, called a shack tool, alternates striking one of its arms in place, stepping around the room like a slinky walking down the stairs. Only it's able to walk up the walls and across the ceiling. The blades do hurt if they strike Samus, so it's understandable to lash out with a plasma beam bolt, which surprisingly destroys the funky gizmo without a fight. Something seems off. There had to have been more to the shack tool. It only appears in this one particular room and never once returns in any game in the entire series. We notice the far wall is actually destructible by power bombs, so by blasting away we reveal a dense wall of sand, but there's no way to damage it or get through. Aha! Exiting and re-entering the room to respawn the shack tool, we drop another power bomb, obliterating the wall, allowing the shack tool a chance to carve out a path for us. Standing back, the unconventional robot gets right to work. Its circular blade arms burrow right through the sediment, and its alternating flip walk perfectly destroys every block of sand in the hallway. Who built this odd contraption? Why was it locked in this room, meandering around aimlessly until we came in here and allowed it to continue digging? It's possible that the space pirates engineered this device for excavating the caves of Meridia and abandoned it here when the job was complete, but we don't really know. At the end of the newly dug canal, we intrude on the home of a couple yards in front of a new blue door. Inside, we are met with a metallic enclosure with a small pit underneath a floating block. Forced to roll inside, we slide down the long drop and land in a crossroads. Heading right first, we bounce down a series of steps before dead-ending at the bottom. However, from our vantage point, we can see a new Chozo statue just on the other side of this rock wall. That is, assuming Samus can even see through her morph ball in the first place. On top of see through a rock wall, no amount of magic Chozo DNA is gonna help me swallow that pill. Anyway, we work our way back up and try the left path, which drops us down 2 more small pits. Rolling right along metal-plated grating, we bomb jump our way through the tight space and pop out right in front of our new upgrade, which turns out to be the Spring Ball. A handy optional upgrade to our morph ball, allowing us to freely jump. Convenient that's what we found here, considering the way out would have been nearly impossible without it. Sliding back through the tunnel, we easily jump up through the high pits without the need to bomb, gliding right back up and out of the tunnel system. On our way back, we are relieved to find the sediment did not respawn, and might discover the shack tool is oddly invulnerable to our speed booster, even though a single blast from our plasma beam disintegrates it. Weird little gizmo. Anyway, we take the 4th pitfall trap out of here and work our way all the way back to the destroyed glass tube entrance to Meridia. Remember that once we fall down that sand pit in the yard room, we're effectively forced all the way back around again if we want to return, unless we've killed Dragon, unlocking an alternate path. However, it's not much faster. You've probably noticed by now that Meridia's actual map is extremely interwoven and confusing. Having a map in-game actually makes this place even more dizzying as we try to make sense of the layout. 2 rooms may be right next to each other on the map, but are in fact fact separated by a long series of twists and turns, many of which drop down or, in the case of the elevator shaft, go directly through other rooms. Now, even though our current goal is to return once again to the sandy pits of the yard room, we are going to take a quick detour. In the first room of Meridia's bottom entrance, let's finally take that second door from the bottom. This is another large, dark, vegetated room with tall, rocky pillars separating deep recesses in the earth. Or Zebus? Do we say the planet's name when referring to its own soil? That doesn't really sound right, even though it probably should be. Anyway, our map clued us into a hidden room with no visible entrance, just to this room's right. Space jump makes this room far more manageable, so we avoid the patrolling Skullterras and occasional magenta space pirates to land in the far right pit underneath a blue door on the ceiling. This and the other blue door on the western ceiling both lead to the tall grapple swing PowAmp room we trivialized with a diagonal shine spark. Dropping down this pit, noticeably shallower than the first two, we poke around with X-ray scope to investigate the scene. Surprisingly, the left wall, not the right, is actually the false wall, allowing us to pass through. Excitedly dashing through, we only land stupefied in the next pit. Checking again, there really isn't anything else here. But now we know to look out for false walls in the room. Moving into the next pit to our left, we drop past a couple pirates and find another false wall to our right at the basin. Heading through, we run through a surprisingly long hidden path leading to a red door at its terminus. On the other side, we pass through a short tunnel letting out into a huge, relatively empty room. Along the ground is a small family of docile, six-legged armored turtles called Tatori. Though docile, if we antagonize the little ones for too long, the full-grown mother will get angry and protective of her young, retreating into her shell and spinning towards Samus, trying to ram her away. The entire race is effectively invincible, so don't even bother trying to defeat them. Once again, this is just a mother protecting her children from us. They didn't do anything to us in the first place. We barged in on their home and started kicking the children about the room. Speaking of which, if we jump on and kick these Buzzy Beetle lookalikes from Super Mario Bros., they will comically spin around the room just like actual Buzzy Beetles. The large armored mother, however, doesn't find this very amusing. Her shell is overgrown with bulbous fungi. Her 6 legs are strong like an elephant's. Her tail is a thorned ball, and her face is a menacing horned mess with her eyes bleeding into her mouth. It's intimidating. Not exactly the mama bear you want to provoke, but this room is otherwise a dead end, and we already know from the map that there are upgrades in here that need grabbing. Assuming we didn't have space jump yet, our only choice to explore the top of the room would be to intentionally instigate the Tatori to jump on her back and ride the rampaging Tarrasque as it launches us high into the air. Way up in the very top of the room is a single grapple block with an energy tank positioned just on top of it. We need to quickly equip our grapple beam, latch onto this singular block, and do a full 180 swing, flipping ourselves up and around to land on top and grab the tank. But we had to pass this room a second time anyway, so personally I never do this room without space jump, especially because that was just the easy upgrade to grab in here. The second is a pain in the neck. Halfway up the right wall, we can shoot to temporarily expose a cheekily hidden missile expansion. Grabbing this while rodeo wrangling the Tatori into cooperating is tough, but honestly so is freeballing it with space jump. It isn't even entirely evident where exactly the missile is hidden at first, so you'll almost certainly be hugging this wall for a while trying to shoot and quickly grab it. Personally, I'd rather not rely on the finicky turtle to get me there, but that's just me. Saying goodbye to the Buzzy Beetle family, we continue our trek around Meridia all the way back into the frozen yard room, once again shooting a hole in the far right pipe to enter the bottom level. This time we run and jump over the first sandpit to see what's on the other side, and guess what? It's another sandpit. Sinking down through the floor, we shoot the antagonistic bulls away as we drop below the screen. We are spat out in another sandfall in a similar rocky chamber to the last one. Looking around, there's nothing to our right but a dead end with a boulder landing on our heads for even looking. Nice. So instead, we work our way left, taking care not to accidentally sink through the sand trap again. Doing so would mean retreading the long journey back here for a third time. Climbing the left wall, we hit a dead end, but at least get a visual visual on 2 upgrades to our right, as well as another boulder to our head. Thanks, Meridia. One is a missile expansion, and the other is shrouded in an item orb. Interesting. Heading back down, we find the loose cubes of rock are vulnerable to our beams, so we blast open a path. Once we hop up and take a step forward, a boulder comes loose and starts to fall towards us. Avoiding the pit below, we jump forward to dodge it, where yet another boulder collapses, so we dodge by jumping forward again, only to drop through some pitfall blocks, falling back out of the mini maze. Well, this all feels familiar. Heading back through, and with the boulders dislodged, we shoot the next blockade away with our wave beam and contemplate how to make this next jump. We have to somehow jump from this position, turn around midair, enter Morph Ball, and slide through the top right nook to progress. That is, assuming we didn't discover the spring ball first. Simply jumping up in Morph Ball form, we can avoid the pitfall trap and slide through to the upper tunnel. Continuing to jump around the channels, we can now easily grab the missile expansion and shoot open the item orb, revealing our 4th and final energy reserve tank. And with that, we drop back down, sink through the sifting sands on the left side, and can finally say that we have 100%ed Meridia. It was quite a mysterious and challenging stretch of our adventure, but it was full of surprises and intrigue. Now, before we take this chapter to a close, let's finally take that northeastern exit we discovered earlier, leading back to the elevator at the top of Lower Brinstar, which itself leads us back to Crateria, which we can finally complete as well. Almost anyone who has acquired Space Jump for the first time is itching to return to the ship at the surface to try jumping up into infinity. The map does extend shockingly high up into the sky after all. As we ascend past the billowing storm clouds, a new precarious cliff extends out towards us. Accepting the invitation, we follow the path to the right, uncovering a new yellow door. The game's attract mode clips clued us into this cliff by demonstrating mid-air morph ball bomb jumping at the tall cliff below in order to reach this point. We didn't explore it until now, considering it's a long ascent, and maintaining a morph ball bomb rhythm that long isn't something I'm particularly skilled at. At long last, we power bomb the door and investigate a dangerous room with rolling acid below and low-hanging mechanical beams above, some of which are spiked. As we leap from the stepping stones, flooding and receding right at water level, a new yellow and green Alcoon leaps from the acid to attack. Somehow these Craterian variants of the magma-dwelling monsters manage to survive in pits of Zabezian boiling sulfuric acid. That's something only a few rare extremophiles on Earth can pull off, like tardigrades for example, but nothing even close to the scale of an Alcoon. Shooting the second ambushing acid-dwelling Alcoon and dodging the hazards, we reach a power bomb expansion at the room's end. Heading back to the surface, you're likely to stumble upon another hidden alcove by trying something you're probably eager to do. Running at full sprint off the cliff, we charge Speed Booster and go hurtling out into the stormy skies using the cliff like a ramp, and suddenly crash through some weak blocks in the left wall. Didn't expect that to happen. Once again, if we recall the opening Idol cinematic, there was also a moment when Samus was shown performing a horizontal shine spark leading left from the lower cliff, smashing through the same weak point in the left wall. Using the topmost cliff to instead charge a shine spark, we drop down to the cliff below to aim and fire our own horizontal shine spark to discover this new path for ourselves, colliding with a brand new blue door hidden in the cave. Just beyond is another acid-filled lake with even more treacherous hazards. This time, the acid has a more extreme variation in tide levels, let's just say. And there are going to be many large blocks in our way. And that's ignoring all the yapping maws and waivers we will also encounter in this room. To be honest, this room was designed for us to belittle with a future upgrade, but it's still very much possible now. However, it's more difficult. These blocks cannot be shot, but instead must be cleared away with power bombs. The trick is to carefully detonate bombs where you'll get the most out of them, destroying more than one blockade at a time. If the acid-dwelling yapping maws frighten you, remember a single super missile can shut them right up. You could also just freeze them with the ice beam. Though the first blockade we could just waltz under, the rest of the 6 blockades will all require us to destroy them before passing. This could be tough, but fortunately our ship was right there in the last room, so we were granted granted access to a save and full ammo restock. Once we reach the end of the room, leading through a blue door and right in front of a new Chozo statue holding an energy tank in a rocky tunnel supported by metal beams. After collecting the upgrade, we might be suspicious of the room, as it looks like we could reach the other side somehow. X-ray scope shows us a vulnerability in the floor below the statue. Unless you enjoy boiling alive in acid, let's preemptively drop a power bomb and wait for the acid to recede before quickly rolling through the new tunnel we just created, where we jump up and out into more metal grates and planks to avoid the incoming acid wave. Power bombing also destroyed a pipe that would have blocked us here as well, so instead we continue onward through the cave where the spikes begin to litter the ceiling and more blockade walls impede our progress. After 3 blockages are removed, spikes almost completely coat the ceiling and the ground nearly disappears beneath us where only a few small metal blocks remain in the acid. And even they aren't completely safe, as the acid will overflow even these small sources of safety. Dropping a power bomb and space jumping daintily into the safe zone until the blast clears a path, we can squeeze through and discover the end of this treacherous channel where a yapping maw and a new nest of Zebo await us. Use the Zebo to restock if you're feeling worried about your health, considering that was a particularly perilous journey. You did just get an energy tank though. In the next room, we are completely enclosed in purple bricks, and I mean completely enclosed. There's hardly any room to even turn around. Jumping and shooting, we can blast away 4 rows of bricks, but still don't see a path forward. The wise thing to do would be to investigate with the X-ray scope. Below the new tunnel we just created are a tower of pitfall blocks. If we just barrel on ahead, we would slowly fall to one side of the blocks, as they immediately reform above our heads as we fall. Suddenly we pass a missile expansion to both our right and to our left, but they are locked away behind more brick walls. Before we know it, we fell all the way down and realize there's no way back up to try this event over again without retreading through the 2 long acid rooms. Instead, while falling, if we shoot at the walls protecting the missile expansion we fell beside, we can fall into the small cubbyhole and grab the upgrade. However, this still means a whole second trip just to go back and fall on the other side to grab the second expansion. Knowing about this trick in advance, we can instead fall right between the 2 expansions, clearing both sides of the pitfall blocks as we collapse through the floor. Shooting at angles down and to either side, we can safely clear the way to nab both expansions in a single pass. This was the first time we had to creatively use pitfall blocks to outsmart a trap in this way, and we were only incentivized to do so because of the thought of the long, dangerous runaround if we screwed up. Dropping below, we work our way down a long shaft adorned with mysterious symbols etched into the decorative bricks. They look like eyes with a ring of orbs orbiting it. Unusual to find archaeological discoveries within what we already knew to be ruins of one civilization. It's entirely possible that there were others here even long before the Chozo. At the bottom of the shaft, we shoot around and clear away some bricks, but neither to the left or the right lead anywhere. However, they do release some reclusive B-toms which quickly pounce on us for destroying their homes. Instead, we bomb the ground and drop into a hidden shaft. Rolling about, we fall through some pitfall blocks on the left, dropping us into the familiar zigzagging room with space pirates, who now effortlessly go down in a single shot thanks to our new weaponry. For players who didn't stumble upon the secret entrance to that whole cave system above, by using the X-ray scope in this room, we can spy some power bomb blocks above us. If we leapt through and climbed back up, we would pass the mysterious decorative eyes and be blocked just below the 2 missile expansions, informing us that we need to find a way to explore higher up from another direction, leading us to the true entrance. And finally, we have 100%ed Crateria. Before we reconvene back at our ship, we have one last destination before we conclude this chapter of our journey, and fortunately, it's right below us. Returning to the golden statue room, the bottom right creature's blue eye flashes and shatters, freeing the enslaved spirit within, turning the entire bottom row of statues a dull gray, with only one remaining perched on the top, who we already know to be the space pirate elite Ridley. We can now clearly recognize the third statue was indeed Dragon, confirming his affiliation with the space pirates as well. This also implies that his entire brood, the Avir, were either working for or otherwise enslaved by the space pirates. Even this sculpted recreation of Dragon clearly accentuates the human skulls lodged in his head, with one silhouetted against the background, its teeth refracting the dim light of the moist chamber, and its eye sockets cold, frozen, and black. This alien coalition of races see the human race as a pest to be exploited and exterminated. Though their actions seem vile, they only do from our limited perspective as humans ourselves. If the skulls in Dragon's head were avian Chozo in design, we wouldn't feel this disturbing sense of unease and violation from his visage alone, even though the Chozo were as closely allied with our interests as humans. Perhaps humans really are intergalactic pests. Each of these space pirates' elites were the heroes of their own stories. Each led their armies and research teams to pursue a united goal of cooperation amongst themselves and elimination of the threat against their lives. They defended their homes, their families, their ways of life. We, on the other hand, kicked down their doors armed with a gun. We thoughtlessly slaughtered everything in our path in order to reach them. We snuffed out their lives for no other purpose than to activate this golden statue's spiritual lock. We are just one human, and they are armies of alien races from across time and space. What gives us the right to become their judge, jury, and executioner? And no matter what crimes they may be guilty of, would the punishment ever justify murdering a father in front of his children? The truth is, we are not morally justified. We are not looking down on these races because we believe ourselves to be more worthy than them in controlling the universe. The truth is, we are hunting them down regardless of race, regardless of intent, regardless of consequences. We are hunting. The blood that we've spilled, the planet we've wrecked, the families that we've destroyed, they don't faze us in the slightest. We've become so detached that we've devolved into the cold metal killer the space pirates fear us to be. All that matters is the last Metroid. Forget the laws of the Galactic Federation. Forget the bonus we are almost assuredly receiving for preemptively launching this attack and rescue operation. Ignorance is bliss for the winners of the war. As long as the enemy is dead and the prize reclaimed, the glory goes to the victors, the writers of history, crafting an amended propaganda legend of the sole bounty hunter who took on an entire planet as the tragedies of the fallen rings silent. No one will ever know the history, struggles, and legacy of the Avir left crippled without their commander and father. Their architecture, their culture, their circumstances that brought them here will all be forgotten and erased from history in favor of an amended heroic human fiction. We have come too far to second-guess our actions. To complete our quest and erase the space pirates' influence over the galaxy, only one burning question remains. Where is Ridley? Phew, that was a big one, but welcome to the end of Chapter 6. Wow, this was big and took me quite a long time to get done. I can confidently say that the next two, or rather the last two chapters of the Super Metroid experience are not going to be this long. They should finally start winding down and being a little bit more concise like the first few chapters were, where we were focusing on less content, so it was a little easier to avoid getting stuck in the weeds like we tend to do when there's so much to talk about, because the good beginning and stopping point of this one was the entirety of Meridia and completing Crateria. From here, we are going to go down into Lower Norfair for Chapter 7, and once we've defeated the final bosses and unlocked the golden statue, our final chapter will be in Torian. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. I already have notes, actually, for what I'm going to be working on after I am done with the Super Metroid Experience chapters. Each chapter has a couple things that I want to go back and update. Things like better artwork from the player's guide that I would like to splice in instead of some of the artwork that I did show for items and enemies and things like that. But also, there's all sorts of little things that I would like to touch up. For instance, I really do not like the introduction that I shot on my phone for the beginning of Chapter 1. And since then, I've actually gotten a physical Super Nintendo with a copy of Super Metroid with the manual and the box. So I would like to showcase that stuff in a better intro. Likely be more than just new footage. It would also be new audio recorded as well. Chapter 1, I've got a lot of work there too. I also want to showcase defeating Ridley at the Sarah Station. It is possible, it's just hard. Chapter 2, I want to showcase moonwalking and moonfall there because I forgot to do that completely. It didn't occur to me to look through the options because I almost never do it, but moonwalking is in there and it is kind of helpful in certain ways. Also wanted to talk about a couple weird things in Chapter 2 about mechanics of how you can make Samus go even faster, things like arm pumping and the Alcatraz escape. In Chapter 3, I actually want to mention, after you quick kill Kraid, if you manage to do it, you will lock your screen in place and you'll have to play off screen, and it's happening while you're watching it, but for people who are listening, they're completely missing out on that really weird aspect of the game and how you can kill Kraid so fast the game can't even keep up with you. Chapter 4, I made some notes. I want to go back and better explain how reserve tanks work. I think I was reading some bad information when I made my original script, and since then I've realized that what I said wasn't entirely correct, or it was only correct sometimes, so I just want to make it completely correct. On top of that, I want to showcase how to, what the fans call, climb Bubble Mountain. It's something that I do anymore when I am casually playing the game, and it is saving you a lot of time of a runaround in basically the giant exploration of Norfair in Chapter 4 that we did. You could cut out about 30% of that just by wall kicking up the green bubble room. In Chapter 5, even just the last one I did, I made a stupid mistake where even in one of the jokes I said, it was like, oh, we've thrown these work robots into an Iron Maiden spike trap for the rest of their lives. Also, we could pick up 10 missiles. Well, missile upgrades in this game give you 5, so it's actually worse than what I said. I need to go back and edit that out and make sure it's correct. See, I want to make sure that there's no mistakes in this. This whole thing, I don't even know how long the entirety of Super Metroid Experience is going to be, but I want all of it to be as accurate and perfect as possible so I can just have this enormous magnum opus about one game. And I'm sure when I start working on Chapter 7, I'm going to look back at this one and have more notes of things that I want to go back and update, but that's something you can look forward to after all the chapters are finished. I will make a concise giant version to release, but also in that version there will be all those changes and updates and visual flair that will make it even better than the chapters you have seen up to this point. If there's anything else you would like to hear me cover about in the Super Metroid Experience before we pass up the opportunity that I somehow haven't already talked about, please let me know in the comments. I'm more than willing to incorporate anything that I can to talk about this game even more, if you couldn't tell. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. Remember to like the videos and subscribe for more, and I will see you all in Chapter 7 of the Super Metroid Experience.